Welcome back. We're going to continue with the Holocaust. In our introduction, we talked about the commandant at Auschwitz, Rudolf Hirsch, and who was captured at the end of the war. Before we hung him, he wrote his memoir, and here are some quotes from it that I think are interesting. He says, quote, in the undressing chamber, prisoners of the Sonderkommandos would tell the Jews in their language that they were going to be bathed and deloused, and that they must leave their clothing neatly tied together, and above all, remember where they put their stuff, so they would be able to find their things quickly after the delousing. Unquote. Some interesting things here. First, Sonderkommando, key term. The Sonderkommandos are Jewish prisoners who are afforded another month or maybe 6 weeks or a couple of months of life in exchange for doing the dirty work around the camp and helping the Germans to manage this industry of whereby we produce corpses. So the Sonderkommandos would greet the Jews as they come off the trains in the camps on their arrival, try to reassure them, put them at ease. We're just going to give you a bath. You're going to be deloused. We've got to cut your hair for this purpose, and again, to try to calm these victims down so there's not hysteria and chaos accompanying mass murder. So Sonderkommandos are given a chance for a little more life here on earth in exchange for doing some of this dirty work, including going into the gas chambers and disentangling the corpses. They take needle-nose pliers with them and extract the gold from the dead Jews' teeth. Of course, we collect their shoes, we collect their hair, we collect their eyeglasses, we collect everything. Remember, Germany's at war. We have the Red Army approaching in the east, and after 1944, we have the Allied Army approaching from the west, so we're not wasting anything. Hirsch continues, he says, quote, those who were standing next to the air shaft were killed immediately. I can state that about 1/3 died immediately. The remainder staggered about and began to scream and struggle for air. After about 20 minutes, there was almost no movement. Now, there's something interesting here. When the doors of the gas chambers are opened, you find these naked corpses in the shape of a pyramid quite often. What happens is that the poisonous gas rises from the floor, and now the victims begin to claw and climb and scratch over each other, trying to reach that last gasp of air up near the ceiling. So these bodies have to be disentangled by the Sonderkommandos, loaded onto carts, taken upstairs to the crematorias, where these bodies are shoveled into these ovens like big pizzas and then incinerated. Again, this is an industry, and we produce corpses. Hirsch continues, quote, the Sonderkommando now set about removing the gold teeth and cutting the hair from the women. After this, the bodies were taken up to the ovens. Crematories 2 and 3 could cremate 2,000 bodies in 24 hours. It's an industry. This is interesting. Hirsch continues, quote, the gassings had a calming effect on me, since in the near future the mass annihilation of the Jews was to begin. Up to this point, it was not clear to me how we were expected to kill this many people. Now I was at ease. We would be saved from those bloodbaths, firing squads, mass killings. And the victims would be spared too, up until the last moment. Unquote. This is a very interesting observation. Hirsch is saying, okay, we're done with this individual killing, this messy execution-style killing. Now we're moving to industrial killing, which is better for everybody. He continues, quote, horrible scenes occurred, people running away even after they were shot, the killing of those who were only wounded, women and children screaming and running. Another thing on my mind was the many suicides among the ranks of the SS Special Action Squads, who could no longer mentally endure waiting in this bloodbath. The men of the extermination section drank tremendous quantities of alcohol. So the executioners are doing shots of schnapps between shooting Jews in the back of the head. And of course, sometimes they miss, having become tipsy on the alcohol, their aim is not so good. Of course, they will, these execution squads will finally locate what they call the sweet spot on the back of the skull, whereby if the bullet enters just so, the bullet will then exit the mouth or the eye sockets, leaving the head intact for the most part, leaving the victim dead, but at least the head is not exploding and getting blood and brains all over my clean uniform. The sweet spot to avoid the head blowing up like an egg. Quote, occasionally some women would start screaming in some terrible way while they were undressing. They would pull their hair and act as if they'd gone crazy. We quickly took them behind the house or the building and put a bullet in the back of their neck. HIST, of course, will be hung for his troubles. If you get a chance, there's a classic series, a history of World War II, called The World at War. There's a section on the Holocaust, and the chapter is called Execution Squads. And what you'll see here is, I believe, a Ukrainian woman who recalls the day her family was taken to the edge of a pit and shot one by one, tumbling into the pit. It's a very harrowing thing to watch, very moving as well. She has an excellent memory, and she recalls the rounding up of her family and the being loaded onto carts, being taken to the death grounds, looking out and seeing all the dead bodies in the pit, all these naked people bleeding, and she realizes that her end has come, and she's there with her mother and father, her sister, and she has a young girl, probably maybe 3 years old or so, a daughter. And it's very striking because the last conversation that she has with her family is an argument. They've been ordered to strip. Her father will not take off his clothes. The Germans are beating him and trying to rip his clothes off. The family's beseeching him to obey the orders and remove his clothing, and he won't do it. So they have this terrible fight, and this is their last conversation on this earth as they are then shot one by one. Now, it's very interesting to watch this woman describe this because she has almost perfect recall until it gets to her daughter. And she says the guard was pulling her daughter away and then shot her. But then she says you can see her physically push the memory out of her mind. And suddenly she can't recall the details of what happened to her daughter. She herself, and I'm reminded of this because she was grazed with a bullet. The German behind her obviously had gotten high, and he missed. She tumbles into the pit, and she survives in this pool of blood and vomit and human waste and corpses. She crawls out of the pit the next day. Of course, the body's by then, the rigor mortis is set in, and she has some leverage now. She can move the bodies away from her, and she takes refuge in a Polish farmhouse and is hidden for the rest of the war and survives. So I'm going to stop there, and in our next session, we'll end the Holocaust by talking about explanations that have been put forward. Thank you.